Hi, everybody. It's the Week in the Tackle podcast, the podcast where we get together on a weekly basis and tackle things in football that we think are interesting. I'm Tom Rennie, Premier League commentator, SiriusXM presenter, and all-round sex machine. Alongside me is MLS legend, Apple TV broadcaster, US MNT expert, and a man whose Botox is so incredible, it's almost... we don't believe he's had Botox because it's so good, but he's had it. It's Brian Dunson. Hey, buddy, all right?
I have had it, but my eyebrows and my lines, my railroad lines, if you're watching this on YouTube, you can see I've got plenty of railroad lines, which means obviously I'm not really good at Botox, or at least self-poking Botox.
Are you using a filter on? Are you soft filtering? Is that are you
there is
Vaseline? Is the lens covered in Vaseline?
Yeah, there is a soft filter on here, but it's more about like blurring the background. And I realized, like I was told by an expert, that if you blur the background, then all of a sudden you're gonna have like it's gonna be a better the rate of the camera is stronger. That makes it a better look. And so I'm just doing what I was told. I'm an idiot. 3 semesters at Cal State Fullerton, never claimed a major. But you know, here we are back on the MLS grind with Tio Max Bretos.
Well, that's one of the things I want to talk about today. So MLS season is back, so we'll find out what Dunny's been up to and what he gets up to on these plane rides on his own and whatnot. I want to find out.
I've got a story.
I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah.
I'll just mention at the top of the show, I also do want to talk a bit about Man United because another truly hilarious game of football on Wednesday. I want to talk about a bit. Plus, you know, they're weighing the broccoli, so it's funny. I want to have a broad chat about the Premier League title race being over in February, which is just wild. So we'll get into all that, with some heroes and villains as well. But firstly, I mean, you are back after... you know, you're getting to see the kids play football and having a social life, and you were turning up on time for this program for a few weeks and whatnot. Now, of course, you're back on the MLS trail, and they pay the big, so we get you when we can. How was it?
Yeah. And by the way, the roles are reversed. I'm showing up more consistently while you've got a little bit more responsibility. By the way, how was the Craig David concert? Did you benefit from that at all?
I benefited nothing, but I did like when my wife posted a picture of her at Craig David with the lyrics to his most famous song, but also she just wrote, "Fill me in," which is a bit much.
Well, I mean, I guess it's half a baby Rennie is on his way in 9 months based on what her post was, because I saw that post and I wasn't going to say it, but I'm very happy that you brought it up.
Did you know the song "Fill Me In" by Craig David?
Yeah. No, I love Craig David. Late 90s Craig David. Man, I was over in Europe quite a bit. That guy was like between he and Jamiroquai. Like you guys, you English people, it really locked down the sensuality of music baby making over in the UK.
Nobody has ever said
crying.
No one has ever said English people lock down the sensuality ever. That's the first time anyone has ever said that in human history.
I've knighted you.
We've made it. This podcast has now made history. A sentence never before said.
Yeah, we knighted you. Well, congrats. I'm glad you made it home in one piece. Oh, this has gone off the rails.
Take over.
It went off the rails before we even started. We were chatting 10 minutes of just complete shit. Sorry, Tim, because Tim's going to do this in post. Oh my God, Tim is going to be like, what in the flying squirrel is wrong with you two? Well, we should say that you've come up with a new drink called a Jack Collins coming off the backside of the football show, where you've taken bourbon and replaced the gin, which every drink should do because gin's terrible. Juniper is the worst drink in the world. So you've had a nice little healthy pour, and I'm coming off, I think, like 3/4 of an Alani, since Celsius didn't pony up. Alani, get you going really early in the morning. Not as well as a Jack Collins.
Dunny will only drink if someone else has paid for it or sponsored you to do it. I wonder why you're talking about Celsius so bloody much. And now we know. Yes, I have. So it is a real drink. So Jack Collins, our friend from SiriusXM, the encyclopedia of football that is, his birthday today. And someone texted in to say, oh, that, you know, because his brother's called Tom Collins, and they have a Tom Collins for his birthday, which is what he was telling us. And he was like, well, is there a cocktail called the Jack Collins? And our friend, who's a listener, was like, oh, there is one, and it's this, and it's basically lemon, bourbon, and soda, basically, and some syrup. I will make that on the show. And I didn't realise we were going to do this afterwards. So I was meant to be leaving now to go to the West Ham Leicester game. And I'm going to go to the pub and can I meet my dad and whatnot. Instead, we're recording this podcast after I had a massive bourbon. So We'll just see how it goes.
Yeah.
Nothing so far has been talked about, and we're like 5 minutes in.
Well, by the way, I have a question. I'm gonna guess the age of Jack Collins. Ready?
Yeah, 72.
I'm gonna say he's 36 years old with a massive baby face.
Younger. I think it's his 30th. I didn't ask because
Is it really?
I don't know. He's young though. He was born. No, he's born in '93. So he's what's that? 32, 31.
Jesus, that was my sophomore year in high school.
I know. Sickening, isn't it?
Bastards.
I was very young then as well, though. So I don't know. We don't know.
All right. So the original question you asked me, yeah, Tio, Max, and I were back on the road. We were in Seattle. We had actually a doubleheader this weekend to kick off MLS, the 30th season in Major League Soccer, the third season on Apple TV. We had Seattle against Charlotte FC, and the buildup and Dean Smith and everything that was happening. They were kind of like this sexy pick, Charlotte FC, heading into the Eastern Conference battle that is going to be extraordinary once again. But Wilf Zaha coming over, and we were all kind of excited. But then we started to hear whispers that Wilf Zaha was actually back in the UK. He and his partner, the birth of their impending child, and so unfortunately wasn't a part of the game in Seattle. Seattle dominated the course of 90 minutes. Malanda gets a header near the end of the first half off a corner kick, and literally the inability to get the third goal to make it 3-1. Jordan Morris had the double. He was fantastic. Albert Rusnak, fantastic. Jackson Reagan, who had been called into the U.S. camp in January, but Seattle wouldn't let him go for both games. So the U.S. said, hey, just stay with your team. We'll watch you play. He and Yamar, the two center backs, are some of the best pairings in Major League Soccer, specific to the Western Conference. Ball comes over the top. Jackson Reagan kinds of heads it, fluffs his lines, turns and tries to hit a back pass. Woefully underhits the back pass. Burner down the right-hand side, crossed in ball, 90th +4. Yamar, the defender, full stretch, tries to reach for his left foot. Toe pokes it, Meg's his goalkeeper, and Dean Smith and Charlotte get the 2-2 draw. But that's not the story. The story is Max Brados and I are teamed up with JP Navarro and Marcelo Balboa, the legend of U.S. soccer, bicycle kick maniac, short, long, with the mustache, bigote, really awesome. They elect to stay because we've got the next game in the afternoon. We're getting done at like 10 p.m. We have the next game that kicks off at like 1 o'clock local time in Portland. It's a 2-hour, 45-minute drive. It's a 40-minute flight. Maxie and I elect to try to fly. Marcelo and JP, a little bit more nervous about this. So they end up staying the night. They're going to fly the next morning. I didn't like that idea because everything could go wrong. So Maxie and I, he's flying Alaska. I'm flying Delta. We jump in the car. We literally go off air. We both, our bags are packed. We sprint down the length of the field, halfway down the field, because we're right at the midfield stripe, hit the elevator, go down. We got to get on the other side of the stadium. It is pouring cats and dogs. Colleen, our esteemed colleague who's amazing, she almost jinxed us and says, I've never had someone miss a flight. We had 39 minutes from the moment that we left the stadium to doors closing at the airport on our flights. She is woo within reasonable. Like in and out, drops us on a back way. Maxie jumps out. I jump out. He goes to Alaska. I go to Delta. And we dude, text me. We have a car there available if we miss our flights. Maxie gets through, ends up texting me. I got 8 minutes. I had a vodka soda. Everything's great. I get through. I've got the hip. I've got to do a little bit of extra. I've got the belt. Got to take that off. I get the TSA touch. Throw my on. Sorry, Tim. I'm at like A18, which sounds reasonable. The problem is I start at A1. I go A1 to A6, hard left turn. A7 to, what is it? A whatever. And then I turn again. Math isn't great. I have to hit the bathroom because I'm my pants. Sorry, Tim. And then by the time I get to gate 18, I have like 2 minutes remaining before the door gets closed. And she's like, wow, you cut it close. I get into my seat, I'm in like 3A. I got upgraded. I'm like, excuse me, sir, can I get in? I'm sweating like a prostitute in confession. I am drenched from like that 100-yard sprint with a bag and a backpack where like I'm discombobulated. They get on. The door literally closes right behind me. We make it. Put my head on the pillow at 1:30 in the morning. Maxie and I catch a quick breakfast. We've got Portland against Vancouver. 12 minutes in, Portland gets a red card. Vancouver ends up scoring 9 goals in 2 games because it was a 5-0 win in the playoffs against Phil Neville's Portland in Portland. Incredible afternoon. Back home that evening. Everything was fantastic. And I ended my night signing up my son for high school tryouts the next morning because he, like my wife, likes to leave things very, very late before finishing off something that could have been done 3.5 weeks ago.
We need to keep offending our wives on this program. That's the important thing. They're never going to listen to this. No one listening is going to tell them, are they? Right? We're a team, okay?
Yeah.
We keep it secret. Two quick bits from the MLS weekend that stand out. I did want to ask you about the Lionel Messi story, about him sort of putting his hands on the official, or however we
Medi. It was Medi Bellucci. He was verbal volleying to the ref to the point where he almost got a red. But then he put his hand on the back of Medi Bellucci's neck, who's a buddy of mine.
What happens now?
So nothing will happen.
It's not a suspension.
So Luis Suarez, he was fined as well by the disciplinary committee for doing the same thing. So what these guys are doing, and this is oldest time. My Dunsethery is I would wrap a guy up and pull his armpit hair in the middle of a corner kick. It was great because then they look at me like, you bastard, and then the ball comes in, they're not paying attention. What you do is you, like, very softly, you put your arm around, like you're like holding the guy gently and having a conversation with, and then they do this. They give the pincher. It's just a little crab pinch, and you do it on the back of the neck. And when you do it on your opponent, like, people get pissed off really quick. So Luis Suarez did it in a game. It's not worthy of a red because it's not hands to neck, but it's the back of the neck. So theoretically should be a red card. They do the pinch, and then Lionel Messi afterwards, he says something to the ref. You could tell he was hot. Kind of walked away, came back, said something else. The referee showed yellow, and then came back, said something else. And as he's walking towards the field, and again, Javier Mascherano was right. There's context to it. What we see versus what the players, we don't understand everything that's happened on the field. That doesn't dismiss their actions, but it gives a little bit more of a, hey, let's think about this for a second. But knowing Medi, I'm not sure what Medi said, but Medi, the assistant coach for New York, kind of had his arms crossed and looks at him. And then Messi kind of gazed into him, which Messi does. Messi MFs a lot of people, which is fine. He's no saint. He can play the villain at some points. And he came over and, said something, kind of walked away, came back, and he did the same thing, put his hand on the back of the neck and did a little pincher. So he was, he fined an undisclosed amount, and we move on. But yeah, listen, I've said this. I think what's interesting about Inter Miami is with the players that they put together, it's really easy to be an Inter Miami fan. If you're a Messi fan or a Suarez fan or an Alba fan or a Busquets fan, or just the way they play, like, they're a fun, exciting team. But I've also said they can also be the villain. And for a lot of fans that maybe are Cristiano Ronaldo fans, or a lot of fans that look at this team and say, I don't like the way they were put together, or say, like, I don't like the way they act, they can be the villains. So I think they're perfect for Major League Soccer, because you have this exalted, the hero of the, one of the best soccer players, if not the best soccer player of all time, with this incredible eclectic group of difference makers. And at the same time, like, hey, I don't like you. So it's great. Like, you get the yin and yang, and that's exactly, we want heroes. I also think we want villains. Like, I'm a big advocate of having guys and having teams that you don't like, because I grew up in an age of watching the LA Lakers and the Boston Celtics battle the Detroit Pistons and Bill Laimbeers and, Dennis Rodmans and those type. Like, that was great, television. So I think he was fined, and he'll get his hand slapped, and obviously the referees will keep an eye on everything that's happening throughout the course of the season.
The trouble is, we're in an era now where we have basically villains running the world, anti-heroes we aspire to be, and not many actual heroes. Beyond Jarrod Bowen, what do we have? Nothing.
Jarrod Bowen.
We'll get to it. We might not. I don't know. Two other quick bits from MLS. I was going to do one, but there's one other bit I wanted to mention. One thing I learned this weekend from the San Jose Earthquakes thrashing of Real Lake, of course, the worst named team in the world. We can all agree. Your impression of Bruce Arena. See, I'm sure I'd heard Bruce Arena, but your impression, I think of him as your impression. And so when I listened to his post-match, where he was like, they were in, where were they, South America, or wherever, Central America, somewhere a few days ago, and so they were tired or whatever, I was just like, that is, you do an incredible Bruce Arena impression.
Thank you.
It's so good. I mean, is it a talent that makes much money for you?
No. Did I ever tell you the story? So the girls over at MLS a couple of years ago were like, Dunny, I love your Bruce. Can you do the Bruce? And I was like, okay, ask me a question. They're like, all right, like, what did you guys do well last week? We scored more goals than our opponents. And like I always do like the Bruce, like you get the extra shoulder shrug. And then because this was a JP de la Camera situation where JP, I was like, I always made JP ask the first question when we were covering the Galaxy back in the day. Like, okay, Bruce, but like what were you guys doing well defensively then? It's like, we're letting in less goals than the opponents. It's a really simple game, you knucklehead. And so that to me was always like the baseline of like Bruce. And I love Bruce. And I do this with the utmost love. So I did this impression. Unbeknownst to me, Bruce was coming on the next week. And they played Bruce my impression. And they're like, "Did you know Dunny does the best impression of you?" And he's like, that's just the bold-faced lie. And they played Bruce for him. And then they go, "Bruce, what do you think?" And he goes, "It doesn't sound like me at all." And so that one, like for me, and I loved it. And honest to God, like I played for Bruce in the national team. Like I never played, but I was in the national team with Bruce, and like the zingers and like his personality. He's an unbelievable coach. Like I really enjoyed my time. And so everybody that's played for Bruce has a Bruce. So when people ask me for my Bruce, like I've done it a couple times. It hasn't like Bruce still talks to me. I've got a San Jose game coming up in the next couple weeks. Actually, I've got a couple San Jose games. But yeah, Bruce, no surprise that San Jose Earthquakes started off the way they did. And yeah, Pablo's team was on the road and blah, 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 but dropping 4 on RSL, I mean, that was a statement of intent. And I would, if you said you have to make a bet on Bruce Arena, success or fail in San Jose, I'm absolutely throwing every cent that I have that he's going to be insanely successful in San Jose, because what's happening with John Fisher and San Jose ownership, where they've been incredibly tight with spending by our imaginations as fans. He's going to loosen up the purse strings, just like the Crafts did in New England, whether that's the monetary monies that are built for the salary budget and or they announced they're building a brand new training facility or upgrading the training facility for San Jose. So when you bring Bruce in, there's certain caveats that he's going to expect. But with that expectation, he's going to put a proven product on the field. And that was we talk about big storylines, but that was a huge 4-0 win and a real big statement game for the San Jose Earthquakes this season.
And I loved it as well because it was the best name, one of the best names, a proper American soccer team name against, again, the worst name in all football history. So congratulations to the Earthquakes for beating.
Well, they changed their name too. Remember, they were the San Jose Clash.
And this is better. This is better.
And the Clash then moved to Houston to become the Houston Dynamo. And then they gave another expansion back to San Jose, and that became the Earthquakes. And San Jose Clash at Spartan Stadium, Tom Rennie, little known fact, was my MLS debut, July 6th, 1997 at San Jose State, Spartan Stadium. And about 40 minutes in, Jeff Beitcher for the Earthquakes for the Clash took a shot. I turned my head, hit me in the temple, knocked me out cold, had a concussion. That was my MLS debut. Off at halftime.
You never recovered emotionally, physically.
No. 2 days later, I woke up literally the next day, I woke up on a red eye, landing in New York, and I had no idea how I got there. And
nothing changed.
They put me on a plane. I connected through LA, and I still ended up on the flight. And I, to this day, have no idea from the moment that I got hit in the head to the moment of waking up in New York. I have no context of understanding what had transpired in that, 12 to 16 hours.
It was actually 4 years. You've been to England and back in that time, but we hadn't have the heart to tell you. The other thing I wanted to ask you was just briefly on San Diego. I mean, we always like an expansion team, and to win at Galaxy, I mean, that's an historic story that in 10 years, 20 years, 30 years, they'll be like, what was the first ever game? Well, it was that. It was incredible.
Yeah, I mean, and again, context for me, for Real Salt Lake, their very first home game in their history, I ended up scoring the game winner, and you become kind of this like cultish, historical marker of like, hey, who scored the first goal for Real Salt Lake? And they're like, oh, Dunny did at home, blah, blah, blah. This is the same thing for Dreyer, except Dreyer did it twice. Now, again, context, LA Galaxy, MLS Cup champions without Ricky Pooch, because of salary budget compliance and having to think about present and future, they had to make some tough decisions. Joveljic being sold for $4 million over to Sporting Kansas City, had to let go of a couple other high profile players. And in the midst of this, similar to what we saw with LAFC on the backside of last season, which they ended an MLS Cup final, 5 starters missing, 2 substitutes to start the MLS season. Same thing happened with the Galaxy. what's different is that nobody based on this roster, from Tyler Heaps and Mike Veras, the sporting director, general manager, and the head coach, which is Mikey Veras' first real head coaching job. He was a supplement coach for Gregg Berhalter to Mauricio Pochettino for 2 games for the U.S. men's national team. No one expected much. Chucky Lozano, Luca De La Torre. Okay, those were the 2 named players. Reyes in the back, but for the rest of it, it was kind of a plug and play group of players. They looked like the MLS Cup champions. I mean, if you would have blurred the screen and had no idea the names on the back of the jerseys and what colors were what colors they were, you would have said San Diego FC is the reigning MLS Cup champion. So again, some difficulties for the LA Galaxy that they're going to have to work through. Joseph Paintsel unavailable as well. Like Jovic was gone, Ricky Puig was gone. They've got some question marks, but that's a hell of a statement of intent. And not this weekend because they open up against St. Louis at home. Next weekend they're at Real Salt Lake. I have that coverage of the game. Then the next weekend after that, something you're going to want to pay attention to. Tio Max and I are going to be calling the game from Snapdragon Stadium in San Diego, playing against the Columbus Crew and Wilfred Nancy.
Who were very good on the opening weekend. Very, very good. Fixed some problems in the opening 20 minutes and turned it around. Still need a forward, though. I love Russell Rowe and all that, but they're short. They're short of somebody. We'll see who comes in.
Can I send you really quick? Can I send you like a Twitter? No, a Twitter follow.
Go on, yeah.
There's a parody account on Twitter X that is a Chicago Fire fan account, but it's from North Korea. So they literally mock up a Gregg Berhalter picture every tweet, and you have to translate it because it's in Korean, but it says our esteemed leader Gregg Berhalter, and it's like him wearing like a pellet of like a fox and holding like a Thor hammer. Like
why?
Because it's the internet and it's the creativity of the internet, but it's like a Chicago Fire fan account specific to Gregg Berhalter. I've got to send you I've sent it to Marcos. I've got to send it to you. It is like, I have no idea what they're saying. It's just a picture of Berhalter that gets sort of mocked up. But then when you click on the tweet and it says like translate, it's like our esteemed leader, Gregg Berhalter. Like it's just beautiful. Like the creativity of people out there with a little tinge of maliciousness is absolutely gorgeous and fun.
God bless him. God bless him. I wanted to talk a bit about the Premier League and specifically the title race. I like to go on the Opta supercomputer, as you know, because I've been worried about West Ham getting relegated, even though they had a 0.9% chance of relegation last week. That was up from 0.5. I woke up in the night. I woke up in the night before the Arsenal game at like 2 a.m. and it was on my mind that there was a possibility that they might still get relegated, even though like my logical brain knows they're not. My lizard brain is convinced every single diabolical scenario is going to go wrong here. Well, at the other end of the table, the supercomputer has got a 1.3% chance that somebody else wins the Premier League, not Liverpool, which means there is a 98.7 chance now, according to science, and I assume Doge, that Liverpool are going to be Premier League champions this year. And we asked some people today on the SiriusXM show to send in some reasons why like this wouldn't happen. It was like, oh, aliens come to Earth and change all the go inside the mind of all the players like in Men in Black and take over the body to the Liverpool players, or like Arne Slot grows his hair back and decides, I don't need football now, I'm sexy again, and so quits his job, or like Ruben Amorim becomes Liverpool manager. You know, stupid things that may well kill the season. And the reason I'm bringing that up is it's extremely unlikely that Liverpool aren't champions. I mean, what do we put that down to following the midweek games and the weekend games? Liverpool seem incredibly forgettable, great and professional, and they're deserving winners of what's in front of them. But I don't think we're going to particularly remember this season for much beyond the Mo Salah numbers. But Liverpool, I mean, they're 33 shots against combined West Ham and Forest, and really didn't look like scoring more than that Calafiori one that hit the post against Forest. Beyond that, didn't create anything. I mean, this, what does it tell us that on the 27th of February, as we record this, the title race is over in England?
Number one, a spectacular collapse by Man City in a way that we have yet to figure out how to properly address it and verbalize it. An Arsenal situation in which we're having the same conversation that we've had for the past 3 to 4 years, which is the number 9 position, and this idea that Gabby Jesus and Kai Havertz are the solution and the need, not necessarily going out on the market and either overpaying on transfer cost or overpaying on weekly salary or agent cuts in a situation like this, because Mikel Arteta has, I think, on a couple different occasions, um, given us enough insight to allow us to understand that Arsenal were active in the market and weren't willing to budge past what they felt was fair and reasonable for whatever target they were having. That Chelsea's way off the mark, and you and I have an incredible strength in jinxing them after choosing them as our dark horses here right around December 15th. So 2 months later, I think they've won 2 games in those 2 months, maybe. And Man United is, whether we're talking about on the field or off the field, a complete dumpster fire in the 2024 and 2025 season. And by the way, maybe this is a reference point also for the idea of promotion relegation, because the 3 teams that have come up don't have a chance in hell of staying up unless Wolves continue to figure out unique ways in which they want to give up points and put themselves back in the final, that final relegation spot. So yeah, it's just a wild year overall. And maybe this, obviously we're going to celebrate Arne Slot, who there are plenty of question marks in terms of coming in and stepping into the shadow in the history of Jurgen Klopp in the success, which has been extraordinary. And I think he's done a phenomenal way of verbalizing the fans and the feelings of the group of supporters. Like, that's my manager, bro. That's my manager. Did you see what Arne Slot said? Very, very uniquely college frat boy sound right there. But then, who wants to qualify for Europe, and who will be the next kind of like the Brightons, the Burnleys, the Evertons that could potentially, the Leicester Cities without winning the league, that could, could be a Euro, or a West Ham, could be a Europa or Conference League qualifier.
I was with a friend of mine who's an Everton fan. Wednesday night following the game against Brentford, and I was like, "What'd you make to it? What's going on?" He was like, "I'm disappointed we dropped points against Brentford tonight because it's going to stop our campaign to qualify for Europe." I was like, "What?" And actually, they're only about 8 points back from
they're maybe not bad. So yeah,
it's actually a bit wild that you could be like 16th and possibly finish 8th, and 8th could be enough depending on what happens elsewhere. Let me take you back to Arsenal though. I did want to ask you a bit more on that, because like what's not annoying to me, I don't really care, but what's interesting, I guess, is that like defensively, great. Yeah, I'm not sure about Calafiori defensively, but as a group, it's a great unit. The keeper's good, the midfield is good. They have missed Carstek and Rice. Stop playing him as an up and down Frank Lampard. He's not Frank Lampard. Could be Rodri. Make him a Rodri, Mikel. Very annoying to me. But the front line, like the Leicester game where they won, and we talked about it, I think a couple of days after. Marino comes on, gives him a body up front, and he scores a couple of great goals.
Yeah.
Tried it against West Ham from the start, didn't work at all. West Ham absolutely delighted to be playing against that front group, and it wasn't like the chaos of Marino coming on as it was against Leicester, who, to be fair, make West Ham look good. They're so bad, and I'm saying that before Leicester beat us tonight, so this might come back to bite me on the backside. But like, he comes on, makes a difference, doesn't do it against West Ham, does it again against Forest, one of the best defences overall in the league this season. I mean, in the end, I almost feel sorry for Mikel Arteta, which I didn't think was possible, because he would have said to them all, get me a striker. Like, guys, I need a striker. Get me a striker. And it's Edu, and it's then some other people, and someone would have done it this window with Edu gone. I don't know whose job it is. But, like, it is incredible they asked him to win the league with a front line potentially containing Mikel Merino and Raheem Sterling. The fact they're even second's kind of miraculous, isn't it? Should we start thinking about it on those terms?
Yeah, I think that it is. It'll still be disappointing because Arsenal has been so close, and the expectations and the pressure on Mikel Arteta is to prove that to be an elite manager, you have to win a Premier League, right? That's whether it's right or wrong. That's just the reality. But yeah, listen, I think the injuries condemn them. Saka and Odegaard missing big parts. The self-destructive yellows to reds have been big parts of this conversation. Dropping some, 5, 6, 7, 8 points somewhere in that mix, which would have put them much closer than the 13-point gap as we record today on Thursday. And then ultimately, wherever the culpability is, the responsibility for this, you've got the injury concern. You've got Mikel, the way he manages. You have Edu and the circus surrounding his departure or impending departure to Marinakis's Forest group or Olympiacos group, however, whatever that umbrella looks like. Who's coming in? I hear Sven Mislintat is available once again. We know that the Cronkies, whether it's Josh or Stan, will sanction big money moves, but we just don't know how big. But I'm old enough to remember, Ivan Toney was supposed to be the player that was on his way. Victor Osimhen was supposed to be the player on this. I was talking about a guy like Dusan Vlahovic. Seems like he'd be a fantastic pick for this group of players. There's only a handful of strikers that are amongst the elite, ratio of opportunity to finishing, and they're really fucking expensive. Sorry, Tim. So again, transfer costs, sell-on fees, ages or wages for the agents, and then weekly, the weekly wages plus bonus structure for these players. It gets really convoluted and complicated. And I'd be intrigued to see as Mikel Arteta gets more and more frustrated. I feel like he's cracking the door open with just a little bit more information. That's what's unfortunately transpired over the last 2 months. But certainly, I'll continue to reference this point. I think we're going to be looking back at this 5-year collective, 6-year collective of Arsenal and say, where did they fall short? Well, they fell short with their inability to find a true number 9 goal scorer that's going to get them 20 plus goals a season. And that ultimately was the decider, along with an unbelievable Manchester City Pep Guardiola group that kept them from winning a Premier League title.
I mean, what amazes me is that, like, obviously they're going to be trying to buy a striker and they're going to try and sort their forward issues. I think they're obviously going to be trying and have been trying, but like, it's incredible to me that we had this conversation back end of last season. Like, we're doing this a year later, the exact same conversation, and we probably did it the year before as well. Like, they scored 90 goals last season. We did phone-ins on it. Arsenal fans were calling in. We all got Arsenal fans in our lives. They're normally the really infuriating one. And like, they were like, oh, we scored 90 goals this season. Stop saying it's the goals. Stop saying it's the goals. And it was like, no, it's the goals. It's not 6 against West Ham. Like last year, they done West Ham for, I think it was 6 this year or 5 last year or vice versa. Both times, they lost at home to West Ham in the second half of the season, which essentially, last season more than this season, cost them the title. It was the loss against Villa at home in April that cost them the title, or at least continuing to challenge for it towards the end. Like, it isn't the fact you scored 90, you can score 80 and be champions. It was this week and these 2 games. Remember it. Drill it into your mind. These were the games where you've got 1 goal and that 1 goal is going to be absolutely crucial and you didn't get it, because that's what needs to be fixed. Now, I don't know if it is a striker or it's a different way of playing, like Arteta, a bit like Ruben Amorim. He's got a style and he sort of sticks to it. There was a time when he first came in, when he took over from Emery, who of course qualified them for the semi-finals in the only trophy of note that Arteta has won in the half-decade he's been there, and there was 3 at the back, and it was like, was bleeding Mavropanos there, I think, or someone awful like that, or Socrates, or someone like that was in that back line.
Socrates.
Like, he had, that's memory lane. That's better than your Bronx Arena. That's your second best impression. But like, just like, he had another way, and now he doesn't seem to have another way. I mean, I suppose my final bit on this before we move on is, how much is this an Arteta problem, or how much is it if they had Isak, Gyökeres, or similar, it'd be solved?
Yeah, I was just looking at the stats while you were talking. They are 40 goals off their pace. And again, they have plenty of games left, but it's a 40 goal difference as of right now. They scored 91 goals, as you said, 51. I mean, that's a lot of different. I mean, and again, some of these blowouts were significant, but a 1-1 draw was maybe a 3-1 win last year. Some of those. And by the way, there's something that nobody really talks about. Only former players really talk about it, is when you're drying up offensively, that heaps so much more pressure on you. Like, when psychologically that you're going to score 2-3 goals a game, defensively, you're almost prepared that, like, if we make a mistake, like, who the cares? Like, come on, sorry, Tim. Like, let's go, boys. Like, it's okay. We're going to score. Like, don't worry about it. Like, in a season like this, when you're not scoring, or you're not scoring as many goals, and they're still up there amongst the elite, right? Like, Liverpool's got 66, I believe. Man City's 53, Chelsea's 52, Arsenal's 51. So they're top 4 in goal scoring. It's just significantly different. And to be elite, you've got to be in that, high 80s to mid 90s category of scoring goals, because that's going to be the difference ultimately of, are you shut out? Is it a draw? Or ultimately, is it 3 points in the back pocket because it's a 3-1 win as opposed to a 2-1 win where you're not really tight towards the end and people are just playing direct. You've closed the game out. So there's an odd psychology, but I honestly think because they've lost, we're truly understanding the importance of Odegaard. When he's not on the field, huge difference. Bukayo Saka, huge difference. When both of them are off the field, massive difference. And then you know that unreliable Gabby Jesus because of injury concern, and that Kai Havertz, I'm still to this day not sure what his best position is, will be a conversation of content for a lot of fans out there.
Let me ask you another thing. I want to move on to Man United. Now, I don't upset you this week because we're having a nice time, but I do want to
at this point. Yeah.
Mainly because the Ipswich game was just so funny that I do want to ask you a little bit about that. But more broadly, there was a headline on the back of one of the national newspapers here a few days ago. Would have been Monday, maybe Tuesday. And it was, "Thanks a bunch, Jim. Bananas." United Supremo split with 200 jobs. Devil's Hope plan will prune back £1 million. Staff's free lunch has been replaced by fruit. And that's 3 weeks' wages for Casemiro they have saved through quite damaging sort of budget cuts. So you've been a sort of young player at big clubs, so I thought you'd be quite an interesting person to sort of ask about this. Plus, of course, it makes you upset, which makes me happy. They've got what's now known as a zero-based budgeting policy in which every single item of expenditure is scrutinized in an attempt to drive down costs, top slicing anywhere they possibly can. One employee joked it would be easier, quote, to smuggle drugs, end quote, than to send a letter with envelopes scarce, stamps expensive, and the emphasis very much on send an email because we don't want to keep buying the paper. This came from an article in the Daily Telegraph a few days ago, whose sports section is still good. Their news section is mental. Sorry, Tim. The sport is still pretty good, to be fair. There's further elements of the close the canteen to anyone but the first team. Staff who worked there all day were limited to soup and a sandwich. They are now weighing broccoli, so says the story, in order to not give away too much broccoli. I guess that's where the money is really going to be saved. It adds to the wider picture, the broader picture of Alex Ferguson's ambassadorial role and Brian Robson's ambassadorial role being cut. I mean, there was also a story, and I feel this is a bit heavy, this one, but I'll mention it anyway. There was a call about, there was the Kath Phipps story recently, who was the woman who worked there for many, many, many years. She passed away recently. And the story in the Telegraph reports that they basically sent a letter, which they can barely afford the paper to send, but they sent a letter saying, can we have the 2 season tickets that the family have because she's no longer an employee of the club. That was taken from the Telegraph article. So look, some of it's a bit deep. Some of it I can have some fun with. That I won't. But just what's happening here? There was another report that the morale of staff is sort of on the floor. Obviously it is, and people are getting cut and people are losing their jobs. And companies get bigger, companies get smaller. That is sort of the way of it. No job is for life. So everyone has that sort of sense of realism. But when that company is also paying Casemiro to amble his fat arse around the field every other week and sort of earn £1 million every couple of weeks, it hits wrong. And if you don't have the culture, and you don't have the history, and you don't have the fabric of the club because everyone's been sacked, what do they have now?
Yeah, so I'm trying to figure out how to start my response to this because, being out here in Salt Lake City and being a part of kind of the original Real Salt Lake Club back in 2005, watching the way the club has been built since then and watching from the academy setup into the second team for the Monarchs, into the first team, the extraordinary indoor facility, the STEM high school that's attached to the training facility, the extraordinary nights at America First Field, watching the Utah Royals be a part of it and have basically an upgrade, not only to the training facility, but to the stadium locker rooms that either mimics or quite frankly surpasses what Real Salt Lake has on the men's side. To see how dwarfed our salaries were back in the day in 2005 to now watching guys that I played in a very similar position and had a very similar career to watching an unnamed player make 1.6 million when I was on $120,000. And that's the growth pattern of soccer here in the United States. And it's extraordinary, right? 30 years in. And I'm happy for these players. I'm insanely jealous and envious that these guys are going to walk away with monopoly money. But, as a broadcaster, I'm still involved and I get to see this. But when I call a game and then think about, the monopoly money that's happening with this player's going to make over the course of this 90 minutes versus like what I'm making for broadcasting it, that could be, a bitter pill to swallow for some trying to wrap that around their heads. When I think about, and again, the good old days of, Sir Alex Ferguson and David Gill and that group of players, extraordinary. And since then, there's been a lot, and the Glazers coming in, and I think there will forever be a deep dive into how people view a club like that being sold in the manner and being sanctioned in a manner in which it was, the debt to net ratio, and going deeper into that with the Glazers. To be in a situation where it was either Sir Jim Ratcliffe or it was taking Middle Eastern money, to then think about whatever the stadium needs, to think about where the bloated salary roster was, to think about in behind the scenes, which none of us really know, from the training grounds and the cliff to the academy to the setup to the first team, the canteens and the food, to those employees behind the scenes that remain faceless but incredibly important to the club. To then recreate the structure from the Sirs to the Omars to the Jasons to the Dans who's gone to, the Ruben Amorims, to thinking about how much money has been wasted in a short amount of time by the incoming leadership, to looking at a group of players that you're saying, why in the world are you triggering activation clauses for extension of contracts when obviously their play doesn't necessitate anything close to that? But to then see the penny pinching model, which I can understand from business. I'm not naive. I'm great with other people's money. I can understand from a business perspective, slashing fat all over the place.
Yeah.
That being said, I dislike the idea of those that are the genetic DNA of the club being taken out because of this perception of whatever their value is. Because I don't think it's always a numbers oriented business. And I don't always think that the number and the final line dictates or should dictate what the importance of the humanity of a club and the spirit and the DNA of the club should be ultimately. So it's tough, to your point, when you say Casemiro and the 350,000 a week and just sitting on the bench versus the staff behind the scenes that are so incredibly important to the day-to-day life, breath, and function of the players and the club and the backing and the support system. It's a bitter pill to swallow. And watching this all play out in real time is very tough as a United fan to watch, because there's not anything that gives us any reason to believe on the field that there are good times ahead. This all feels like an absolute fucking disaster. Sorry, Tim, to watch as a supporter. And it doesn't feel like there's a light at the end of the tunnel.
You know what's amazing though? Like I worked on the Everton game and of course watched the Ipswich game in midweek. They still won one and drew one. Like even at the absolute worst you could possibly imagine, and they've been so bad. That first 70 minutes until the Bruno Fernandes free kick against Everton was truly astonishingly bad. Like Ruben Amorim, Liverpool agent, I'm pretty sure that like when he came out of the second half, you come out. It was like he was at the wedding of a woman he'd loved for his entire life since like college. And she was marrying his best friend. And he's sitting there thinking, this could have been my life. This could have been me. Just came out in the dugout of Goodison and just started looking down. Like, what am I doing here? What am I doing with my life? Why am I doing this? That's not great.
Rennie, think about this. I mean, 3 months ago, he was smashing Man City in Champions League with Sporting Lisbon, with that group of players. And that group of players has had an absolute disaster since he's left the club. They're on their second manager, and they're nowhere close to the same team that they were. And so how do you have this Sporting Lisbon group of players and manager that were so good in November that then turns into what they are now and what this group of players can't figure out? I mean, like I'm watching Dorgu do everything right, and play the ball back to a goalkeeper that should be in the goalkeeper's position because he's got the angle, he's in front of the player, and it's a simple back pass, and the goalkeeper's in no man's land. Like the decision making of this is infuriating. The lack of tracking, the inability to head ball. Like Harry Maguire in that goal that Everton scored, the second goal, like he didn't even jump, and the ball's literally above him, and he's within the 6-yard box. Like I was saying to my wife, like I woke up at 4:30 for that game on the West Coast. I had a double header that weekend. The stupidity of me waking up and watching that fucking show, sorry Tim, was disastrous. But you walk away, to your point, like it's a draw, and you're like, I don't even know how I feel right now. And then you watch the game yesterday. The credit to Ipswich Town, like at least they're going out fighting with an identity, and hopefully they come back, they go down, they pop right back up, because I feel like they're set for success. But it's Premier League. But I watched that game and I'm like, what are you doing? Like, what are you doing? And then like slide, arms behind my back, 30 foot into the corner. Woo, 3-2. It's like, don't even fucking celebrate. Sorry, Tip. Like, just grab the ball and go back, because it's like, I feel like it would be so embarrassing to even think about celebrating a goal with the way that this team is playing right now. And by the way, where's Luke Shaw? Where's Mason Mount? Like, where, like, what? I saw Lindelof for the first time in like 6 years. That was cool. That was cool to see.
What happened to Mason Mount? What happened to his body? Is he a cousin of
How
Jack?
all of a sudden?
What's happened? He played every game for like 4 years.
Undroppable. Undroppable.
Yeah. But like, I don't believe in curses, but I do sort of think like watching Anthony at Real Betis and then watching Dorgu, who's been great for Lecce, come to Man United and suddenly be like giving away terrible goals. I know it was Anana, but something's being involved in it.
I like Dorgu though. I like Dorgu. By the way, Anthony, did you see his red card that they gave him, which was the most bullshit red card? Sorry, Tim. Now I'm on a roll. But it was rescinded. It was rescinded. It was officially rescinded, so he's back.
So he can't play against Real Madrid this weekend, I think, isn't it?
Real Madrid. Yeah. He looks great, man. And maybe maybe there's a conversation there about like Ajax and maybe La Liga. Well, hold on. Let's start with that, Anthony. Maybe there's a conversation like that's the level, because it's fine. Like there's guys that don't succeed in Premier League that are phenomenal players in other leagues, and maybe that's Anthony because he looks great and he's dancing and doing all the Anthony stuff. Rashford, he's not asked to defend in the same situation. He looks phenomenal. Like he looked so good the other day, and like I'm rooting for him. Like I'm not one of those like I hope he fails. Like I didn't hope Jadon Sancho failed. Like I really hope for these guys that they succeed. And I think Rashford's showing very quickly that he can still be the Rashford that's a full England national team starter.
Do you want my bet for next season? Do you want to hear it?
What's that? Yeah.
Harry Maguire leaves in the summer. He goes somewhere else in the Premier League and is the best player in the Premier League next season.
I could see it.
Yeah. Anana goes to Arsenal and he's better than Raya. Less?
Yeah, they gotta do something about Onana.
He's so bad. He's so bad. So chaotic. I just couldn't. You couldn't. I wouldn't trust him. You know, like sometimes you give your kids like a drink and you think, oh, they can handle this without a cap on it. Yeah, I'll give you some milk. I'm sure this won't end up all over the sofa. 2 seconds later, it's everywhere. He is a 2-year-old holding a glass of milk. That's what
he's not this group's player. So I could absolutely see them trying to figure out a way to make a decision, to find somebody that's a little less chaotic, because he's a phenomenal goalkeeper. But some of the decisions, you can tell he's almost over trying, like, if that makes sense. Like the proactiveness, like he's so agitated to prove that he's an elite goalkeeper that he's making mistakes that he knows he shouldn't make.
Yeah.
But
you can just say it's terrible. It's fine. Don't worry.
No, it's not terrible, but
you can say it, but
it's you keep coming back to, not you, but we all keep coming back to, why would you move on David De Gea if this is like, who was more stable? Like the whole idea of playing out of the back, Ten Hag, and yeah, I mean, I think Anthony's a threat to leave. Onana's a threat to leave. Lindelof's a threat to leave. You got to figure out what you're going to do with Christian Eriksen at this stage. Casemiro, he's done and dusted. I'd love to just see, some of the new kids, and Lenny Yoro plays significant amount of minutes as possible, and just recognize like, okay, there's good people and there's leaders, but the quality isn't there. And for them to figure this out as they strip the parts down to the bare bones, they're gonna have to build this up. And maybe they do it the Chelsea way, where they just go with the young, dynamic potential kids. But in the meantime, they need some leaders, and Bruno needs some help. Bruno's played at a really high level recently. I know the theatrics and the demonstrative, arm waving is annoying to everyone, including myself, but he's been in a good run of form, and he needs some help in that attacking phase of play.
I mean, I think it was lost in translation, so it's not the biggest thing. But I did hear today a quote of him after midweek saying the manager keeps asking us to play a certain way, and it's not working, but he won't change it, which I thought was quite interesting. But there was
you better hope that's a translation issue.
I'll find you. I haven't got it in front of me, so I don't want to talk about it yet. But
by the way, I sent you the WhatsApp of Gregg Berhalter with the North Korean Chicago Fire.
But I don't get it. Like, has he been to Pyongyang? No. Like, what is this?
No, but explain it. Explain it for the listeners out there, what you're looking at.
So I'm looking at a picture of Gregg Berhalter with, like, AI holding a giant log. And
in a tank top.
He's in a tank top and shorts, matching black tank top and shorts. And I'm putting into translate now what it says.
So all you got to click on it, and then it'll say translate more.
Oh, it does in there, right? Okay, I don't use the old the fascist one anymore. It says, the pain of defeat has not subsided, but it makes us resist. As the glorious leader said, when the road gets tough, we become stronger. We will work, we will fight, we will kill the eagle. What? And we will win. For our glorious leader in Chicago. I don't understand what I'm looking at, but I'm into it. I'm super into it.
Right. Because, by the way, the next game for Chicago Fire is at home this Saturday against DC United. The Screaming Eagles.
The Eagle, right. Okay.
That's great. It's a great follow.
There's another one higher up where he's dressed as some sort of North Korean army person. I don't know. One where he's dressed like Richard the Lionheart. I don't know.
Oh, it's brilliant.
I don't really go on this website anymore because of how horrendous Elon Musk is as a person and whatnot, but and how bad the platform is. But I'm back, baby.
Well, but here, hey, let me ask you this. How does it figure out my algorithm when I'm using a burner account and I'm not liking, nor sharing, nor retweeting, nor posting anything? I'm just scrolling.
Why is Twitter now sending everyone to pro-North Korea propaganda? I don't know. Something's gone wrong.
Couldn't help yourself.
Couldn't. I know I couldn't. It's not a political show, but, I'm sorry, Tim. Right. Heroes and villains. Give us a hero.
I'm going to go with Charlotte FC. They're going to be my hero because I think in moments in which you can't figure out how to play your system and your style to the right extent of expectation, coming away with a 2-2 draw on the road at Seattle, I think was a huge positive for Dean Smith, to where it's more like the Roddy Raw, right? You can be disappointed and dig into the group for lack of technical ability or tactical acumen, but there's something about spirit, especially in the beginning of the year, flying across the country, playing in Seattle on the turf, dumping cats and dogs rain, and knowing that Seattle is expectation to be one of the best in the Western Conference. They might have put a step wrong, but I think they put a foot in terms of, I don't know, a really impressive performance considering they didn't play anywhere near what they were capable of doing.
My hero is Jeroboam. I want to talk about Jeroboam for a couple of minutes because his winning goal against Arsenal this weekend was his 50th Premier League goal for West Ham, added to a whole bunch of great European goals, including the winning goal in that Conference League final in Prague. I may have mentioned it. But I love Jeroboam. I think he's the first. I mean, Mark Noble was probably the last actual legend at the club, but of course didn't score sort of many goals in that way. Before that, in terms of great attackers who stayed and deserved legendary status, probably the first proper forward we've had that's worthy of a statue since Paolo Di Canio left 25 years ago. Goal was fantastic. He starts the move and finishes the move. It was great that he scored that diving header next to Declan Rice, who could have been a legend, but instead decided to keep getting second-place trophies at Arsenal for the rest of his career. Sign for a big club. You should have signed for a big club. Tremendous. Hook it to my veins. But I loved it. And what I loved as well is that, so I was at work on Saturday. So I didn't go to the game. I even turned down a seat in a box because I thought we were going to get beaten so badly. And, I had work, so it would have been complicated. So I didn't go. I didn't want to put the effort in to go. But what I found myself doing is I got home late, made myself a sandwich, sat down at our dining table, and you can kind of see the telly in the other room. So I put it on, and I watched on a loop Jeroboam's 50 Premier League goals. just on a loop for about 20 minutes with a low alcohol beer and a fake chicken sandwich, watching the goals. And it was just an excellent experience. And I also got to watch Match of the Day for the first time in like 8 months on Saturday.
That's amazing.
Thank you, Jared. Plus, of course, he is married to the daughter of our most famous fan, Danny Dyer. He's married to his daughter, Danny Dyer, of Love Island fame. So just...
Oh.
Yeah, so there you go. So the actor Danny Dyer's daughter is Danny Dyer. They do a podcast together. I assume it's got Danny Dyer in the title. I wouldn't know. I'm not going to fucking listen to that. Sorry, Tim. But God bless them. And I saw Ben Foster in his podcast. It was like, oh, why didn't Arsenal sign Jarrod Bowen? Could have got him for £50 million, surely. And it was like 50 million for our best player who's on a 7.5-year contract. I assume you're on drugs? I don't know. Anyway, not literally. Right, give us a villain.
But by the way, real quick note, Big Raj, my stepdad, is a West Ham fan. I don't think I've ever told you that, because of Paulo Di Canio in the mid-90s. Oh. He loved what an absolute he was when he played. Sorry, Tim. Just a nutter, absolute nutter. Okay. But that ball where he comes across and he does the karate kick far post, coming across his body, by the way, the technique on that, to jump and whap, far post, side net, great goal. My villain.
I was there.
Were you really?
I was there. You could see me in the background. I'm in the front row of the West Stand, so I'm there.
Shut the front door.
Yeah, that was where our season ticket was front row of the West Stand and the old West Stand. So if you look at the front, sort of level with the penalty area, slightly more midfield than penalty area, that's where our seats were.
Did you have a Lego helmet bonnet with the short long?
I had a Navy West Ham baseball cap on because I'm like 10 years old. I'm a super child.
Oh.
Yeah, I'm very young. I'm actually quite young.
I got to go check it. I always forget how young you are. My villain. Now, this is more of like, not a villain per se, but it's more of like, I need to keep an eye on this. It's the Portland Timbers. Obviously sold Evander to FC Cincinnati, brought in David Da Costa. He was cleared on Saturday with the paperwork. So he got about 45 minutes. Very electric, fun, dynamic Portuguese number 10 coming from, where was he? Rem? I think it was Reem. Can't remember. Anyways, guy's supposed to be calling games. Here's the problem for Phil Neville. Defensively, goalkeeper Maxime Crepeau, Canadian international, who famously busted his leg in the red card taken against the Philadelphia Union in the MLS Cup final 3 years ago. Still the best MLS Cup final in the history of the league. He was in goal last year. I think in 21 starts, he only had one shutout. So concerns defensively. Instead of going 2 center backs, they went to 3 center backs. They went Kamal Miller, Zach McGraw, this young New Zealand kid named Finn Sermon. And the idea, I think, was theoretically, let's be more sound defensively, keep the game in front of us. We'll play with these 3 center backs. We'll allow our outside backs to get going. Forey on that left-hand side is a great addition. On the right-hand side, they played their version of Anthony. Diego Chara played his 400th MLS game, which is extraordinary, 38 years of age. He was the first designated player for the Portland Timbers way back in the day when the team started. They had this kid, Joao Ortiz, and then up top, Kevin Kelsey, alongside Felipe Mora. First step, Zach McGraw into the midfield for, who was it, Ryan Gauld. He hits the ball at the outside of his left foot, up and over the center back. Brian White's in 1v1. Kamal Miller comes over. I didn't love the call, but it's Dogzo. It's a red. It's enough of a touch. It was a poor touch from Brian White, but Kamal Miller kind of grabs him. I don't hate it, but it's hard to argue against it that you're going to overturn it. So we only got a 12-minute sample size. In that 12-minute sample size, I'm not sure about the way that this formation is going to look throughout the course of the year. I think Portland's going to score a bunch of goals, but they scored a bunch of goals last year. I think in transition moments, they're going to be affected. They're going to be open. They've got center backs, outside center backs that don't really feel comfortable flying into space 1v1. So I don't know if it's a villain, but I guess it would be, let's use a data point and keep an eye on what's happening up in Portland. They take on Austin FC this weekend. They'll start with 11 players on the field. Let's see if they can keep 11 players on the field.
I think it's funny we both got weird villains this week, because my villain is Southampton. And not because they're awful, not because they got beaten 4-0 at Chelsea on Tuesday. It's that at this point, I found out that following the game against Chelsea on Tuesday, they now have the exact same amount of points that Derby County had in 2007-8 when they went down on the lowest amount of points in Premier League history, which was 11. So they have 11 games left to get 2 points to level it and 3 points to get above it. But at this point with 11 games to go, I think it will be villainous to try and win another game of football between now and the end of the season. You need, at this point, when you've been this bad, to be the worst ever. I think it'll be apt for Southampton to be the worst ever, and it'll be a real wake up to those teams that are going to come up again this season, that you can't come up in the way you used to come up. Beyond Forest, to be fair, they did it differently because they spent the crazy, weird money. But since really, like Brentford, no one has come up with last year's team and done a particularly good job. And that's like one team in the last 5 or 6 years. When Leeds come up in a couple of weeks' time, sack Farker immediately, get rid of all the players, and build a Premier League team from that point. Hire Sean Dyche if you have to. Like, get rid of everybody, because no team that comes up is going to be able to stay up. The gap has become bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. And I think Southampton need to prove that point. So from this point, Ivan Juric, if he wants to do anything memorable, needs to find a way to throw every single game between now and the end of the season. And he might not even have to do that, because beyond Aaron Ramsdale, there's literally no one who played on Tuesday who's going to be back in the Premier League next season. So maybe by accident, he might sort of throw games this year. They've got to get 9 points. Just lose every game. Let's make it memorable, guys. Be the country's, nay, the world's biggest losers.
But by the way, this poor guy, he takes over for Jose Mourinho at Roma. Last, like 7, 8 games. He gets his first win against Leicester City. I thought he actually did well against Man United at Old Trafford, and the wheels have completely fallen off. And by the way, did you see in one of the post games, like, do you think he'll be here next season? He said something like, I'm not sure I'm going to be here next weekend. Oh, I love it.
But he's going to make this year from those 2 sackings millions and millions of pounds. So, God bless him for his honesty. He's going to get paid for it. Right, that's Week in the Tackle for this week. We'll try and do it earlier in the week next week, but we'll see what happens.
We'll see.
Dunny's a very busy man. He's on planes. I'm not working this weekend, so I could probably do it, but I guess we'll see what happens. That's Brian Dunseth over there. I'm Tom Rennie. Tim Horsey produced the programme. Sorry, Tim. It's Week in the Tackle. See you next week.